The City of Hamilton's Neighbourhood Action Strategy was created in November 2010 to address health and well-being inequities in Hamilton neighbourhoods. Employing an asset-based community development approach, the Neighbourhood Action Strategy utilizes the greatest resource in any neighbourhood, its residents, to intentionally focus dialogue around the positive things in the community. This innovative strategy blends the foundation of asset-based community development with land use planning to develop resident-led asset-based neighborhood action plans that build on local social capital and address the health inequities in 11 Hamilton neighborhoods. The neighborhood action plans were developed through an intensive planning process led by a core group of residents and service providers and facilitated by either the neighborhood development office and a city planner or a community development worker. The completed plans present a clear vision of the future and describe projects that are implementable, achievable, and have widespread community support. Currently, the implementation of the plans are taking place in neighborhoods with service providers and city support, but mostly through the hard work and dedication of Hamilton residents. So now I'd like to introduce our webinar guests. Suzanne Brown has recently accepted the position of Director, Neighborhood and Community Initiatives at the City of Hamilton. Congratulations, Suzanne, a division that includes the Neighborhood Action Strategy Initiative. Previously, Suzanne managed the Neighborhood Action Strategy since June 2011, where she coordinated the development and implementation of the City of Hamilton's Neighborhood Initiative. Suzanne joined the City of Hamilton in 2003, working in public health in program evaluation and chronic disease prevention. Prior to joining the City of Hamilton, Suzanne spent 8 years at the Social Planning and Research Council as a senior social planner, where she was involved in a range of social planning activities from grassroots community development through to community-based research, policy analysis, and project development. Suzanne has a Master's of Social Work in Social Welfare Policy from McMaster University and a Bachelor of Arts from Wilfrid Laurier University. I'd also like to welcome Renee Wetselaar to the call, and she is a senior social planner and with the Social Planning and Research Council of Hamilton and the principal of Renaissance Consulting. Renee's work focuses on the SPRC's priority areas of housing and homelessness and equity and inclusion, with her main role being the manager of the Neighborhood Action Strategy. She is engaged in strategic planning and policy development, community development, evaluation, and collaborative partnerships. She has considerable experience in developing and coordinating initiatives involving a wide variety of stakeholders across many sectors and parts of the community. With no further ado, I would like to welcome Suzanne and Renee to our learning community and invite them to begin their presentation.
Great, thanks, Christy. Suzanne Brown from the City of Hamilton.
And Renee Wetselaar from the Social Planning and Research Council.
So Renee and I are going to bounce back and forth through the slides. If you hear our voices change, that's on purpose. And of course, we'll be as quick as we can with our slides because really we're most interested in hearing what your questions are. So just to start, can we go to the next slide, Zoe? So just to start about how we got here, as you heard in the introduction, the neighborhood strategy launched in 2010, but there was a lot of work that was already happening in the Hamilton community that really laid the foundation for the neighborhood strategy come to reality. So the social determinants of health have actually been around, as most of you probably know, in the public health realm for about 40 years. And so that really has been a period of education around what really does create good health in our community. And so our public health department had been looking at social determinants of health for a number of years, and so felt that this idea of a neighborhood strategy fit very well with that. And their contribution to the strategy actually is that they fund the manager position, which I've just recently left, but they actually fund that position in recognition of the importance of the social determinants of health. We've also had community planning in Hamilton, as I'm sure other municipalities have, and our community planners were very good at going out and creating neighborhood plans where they were interested in land use. However, when they talked to residents, of course, residents wanted to talk about many, many things that were important in their neighborhoods beyond land use, which our planners dutifully recorded and created a very lovely plan, but unfortunately they had no mechanism to shepherd the rest of those ideas through the city. So while people talked about safety, schools, lots of things about neighborhoods. That was recorded, but then not much was done with it. However, that work was happening. The Hamilton Community Foundation, which has really been the institution that we can most say is responsible for the development of the neighborhood strategy, has been doing community development work in Hamilton for the last 8 or 9 years. And they have funded community development work and continue to fund the community developers that work in the neighborhood strategy. So they are a huge part of how this actually came to be about. We have a Hamilton Roundtable on Poverty Reduction that had a long series of articles in the Hamilton Spectator that really raised awareness around issues of poverty and inclusion, and that also set the stage, I think, from a broader public perspective on the success of the neighborhood strategy. But all that being said, the match that ignited the strategy was a series of articles in the Spectator called Code Red. We don't use Code Red in the neighborhood strategy. It's stigmatizing and offensive to many of our residents, so we're very careful. But as the historical background, we do recognize that this series of articles, which really showed very graphically the health inequities between neighborhoods, was really the match that lit the fire that started the neighborhood strategy. So quickly go to the next slide. This really is just a background slide on social determinants of health. And really the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age is a general definition. There are 12 social determinants of health. I expect that most of you know what they are, so I'm not going to spend too much time going through those. Next slide. I talked a little bit about neighborhood action planning. So we really use, in our neighborhood action plans, we use the methodology that our planning department had used for years in creating neighborhood plans, and we added a few pieces in and tweaked it a little bit to make it a very unique action planning process. But anyone who's used to strategic planning, operational planning, neighborhood planning will recognize the steps that we use. But what we started with is we started with an asset map, and Renee's going to talk a little bit more about asset-based community development. But we started with what are the good things about your neighborhood that you like? What are the assets in your neighborhood, be they people, institutions, services, businesses? So we really framed the neighborhood action plans from a very positive base, which was something that I think really when you read the plans, you'll see a lot of positivity in them. People are very proud of their neighborhoods. They want to talk about them, and really the neighborhood action plan's primary value is focusing the work that people want to do and keeps them on track. So these are all ideas that have come out of the neighborhoods over many years. But what the plans did was they documented them, they put them in a work plan, and they are a mechanism by which the neighborhoods can go back and really make sure that they're on track with creating the work that they want to have happen. So you can see all of our neighborhood action plans. We have 10 of our 11 neighborhoods have created plans. They're online at the City of Hamilton's Neighborhood Development website. You're certainly welcome to download them. And they really detail very uniquely for each neighborhood the actions that residents want to work on to improve their neighborhood. Next slide.
So this is Renee, and I'm going to just talk very briefly about asset-based community development and just getting kind of a high-level overview of what the thinking and the philosophy and the approach is. So in its simplest terms, it really does mean seeing the glass as half full rather than half empty. And for those eternal optimists out there, you love this kind of work, and this is really the kind of work that you should be thinking about. So asset-based community development builds on the skills, strengths, and supports of residents, neighborhood groups, and community institutions within the neighborhood and the city to build stronger, healthier communities. And an essential component to this work is communication and trust. And this is fostered and facilitated through the community developers who focus on building relationships with residents, the planning team, and the wider community. So our community developers, we have 6 of them that are full-time that are engaged in this, and we have 4 or 5 others that are kind of working part-time in some specialized areas. Their role is to really go out there, meet people in community, talk to them, learn more about what their assets are, and help bring them together with other like-minded community members or people who share the values of asset-based thinking. We now will show you a short video illustrating the community development work being done in the Sherman neighborhood. So please enjoy this short video.
The South Sherman neighborhood is one of the most unique places that I've ever lived.
I just love the people. Everybody's always been really friendly, and I've got great neighbors, so that's why I've stuck around for the last 3 years.
So it's a really quiet and a friendly area.
We like the people.
What the community has done is identified for the people who live there. What are the issues? What are the things that need to be done to make South Sherman a better place to live, work, and raise their family?
It's nice to come to work where you're considered part of the community.
It's not about us doing things for people. It's about getting people involved. If there's a project or an activity that they're passionate about, they need to get on board with helping make it happen.
Our neighborhood is what we make it, so I'm in.
I think now we're ready for the rubber to hit the road.
Come garden with us.
Okay, great. I'm not sure if people were actually able to hear that video, but the video was actually produced by the residents of the Sherman neighborhood. They spent quite a lot of time. That's actually a trailer. The full video is longer. But it really does speak to the foundation of the neighborhood strategy, and that is working with residents to do what residents want. So as a city, as a Hamilton Foundation, as the Social Planning Council, as the countless partners that are involved in this strategy, it's all led, we all really are led by what residents want us to do. So we don't go in and talk to neighborhoods about what we can provide to them. We talk to residents and we hear residents tell us what they need, and then we support them through that. The Neighborhood Leadership Institute is one component of the strategy that has been evolving over the last number of years, and we really see as one of the sustainable pieces of community development in our strategy. So the Institute takes about 24 residents from the neighborhood, and it's an 8-week session where they meet every other Saturday for a full day. So it's quite time intensive for residents to be involved. And it really builds the capacity, the leadership capacity of residents, so that they can go back into their neighborhoods and share that leadership capacity. They work on a project, and at the end of the session, we help to support them in implementing their project. But really, it's about building skill sets so that people go back into the communities that they live in and help other people become leaders as well. So the Institute is one of the key components to the neighborhood strategy, and we are in our 3rd session right now. So by the time that one is done, there'll be about 60 residents who have been trained through this process who are going back into their neighborhoods as resident leaders. So just the next slide. If you're familiar with Hamilton, or even if you're not, you'll see that these are the 11 neighborhoods that are in the neighborhood strategy. So obviously, we don't include every neighborhood in Hamilton. 8 of our neighborhoods were originally Hamilton Community Foundation supported neighborhoods with their community development workers. The city chose an additional 6 neighborhoods to focus their efforts on. 3 of those neighborhoods overlap. So what we have in total is 11 neighborhoods that we work on, that we work with and work on actions with residents to help improve the health equity in those neighborhoods. So next slide. One of the things we're most proud of in the accomplishment so far is the fact that 10 of our neighborhoods have completed neighborhood action plans. So this was a fairly intensive action planning process. Some of the plans took 8-10 months to complete. So for residents to sit around the table month after month and work on these plans and take them out into their communities and talk to other residents about them, talk to their neighbors, hold neighborhood events to showcase the plans, is a really huge accomplishment. And then those residents themselves came to council and they presented their own plans to council for their endorsement. So that in the top picture by the Beasley banner, you'll see a group of residents, and I believe that's the Crown Point neighborhood, presenting their plans to council. Some of our other accomplishments that we have done together have been community newspapers in Gala, Sherman, Crown Point, and Stinson, community newsletters in Keith and McQueston. These are newsletters and newspapers that reach thousands and thousands of residents across the city and are very well read. 3 of them are actually now self-sustaining. They no longer require grants from the Hamilton Foundation because they have a number of advertising spots that they've sold. So this is a really excellent example of neighbors communicating with neighbors in a way that has proven to be very effective. We've had many fairs, barbecues, Easter egg hunts, park cleanups, playground builds, movie nights, moon festivals, Jane walks, to name just a few of the many, many community engagement activities that are happening across the 11 neighborhoods. We've had community gardens built. We've had a community land trust underway, alleyway projects in Beasley, the Beasley banners that circle one of the parks in the Beasley neighborhood. We have participation now in broader planning. So we have a group of residents very involved with our planning department as we go forward planning some of the major commercial routes in Hamilton. We have an urban farm that is underway that over the past 3 years we've been working on first to do environmental scans and research, then to change bylaws and the official plan of Hamilton. And now we are, this summer, we are going to be building a urban farm, the first urban farm in the city of Hamilton. We're very excited about that. We have a number of partnerships across the city of Hamilton with both Mohawk and McMaster. We have a community campus network where residents meet with researchers at McMaster University to get some of their ideas researched. We have the Canada Learning Bond project that's gone into every neighborhood, signing families up for the Canada Learning Bond. I mean, I could talk forever and ever, and I don't want to take the rest of your time, but there have been such a fantastic array of activities and accomplishments. It really is building momentum of the neighborhood strategy across the city of Hamilton. So I'm going to turn it back to Renee to talk a little bit about some of the projects we're working on right now.
So as Suzanne has described, there's lots of really great energy and projects of all kinds of different scale and levels of activity going on. What we're finding now is that we're kind of more at the medium-term part of the engagement, if you will, and this is where some of the lifting is getting a little heavier. We're working on some larger projects. We're increasing the level of engagement with the residents, and we're starting to tackle issues such as intensification and gentrification in Hamilton. Some of you may know Hamilton is really a hot topic amongst the real estate industry right now, and so we're seeing a lot of growth. And because of the level of resident engagement we have, we really do have residents at the table as part of the conversation as we meet some of these challenges. So working on projects like the Hamilton Community Land Trust, again, the urban farm, talking about food security. We have residents involved in discussions around a major development that's happening in the West Harbour, where we're having some really great brownfield redevelopment happening. So as you can see, it does become, the more you get into it, the more complex it gets, the more complex the relationships get, and the higher profile starts to come along with that as well. So part of the work that we're doing with that, both on the community developer end, is supporting them in some more professional development, looking at issues like equity and access and social inclusion to make sure that we have, for example, the Aboriginal community participating or people from culturally diverse communities. We have a lot of newcomers in Hamilton. So we're really starting to scratch way down below the surface.
Okay, next slide. So one of the things that we did the first project we funded out of the gate was evaluation. So we recognizing from the very beginning that the work that we were putting together was very unique, and we wanted to make sure that it was effective. because there are a lot of resources that are going into the neighborhood strategy right now, and we would like to be able to show value for the work that's happening. So we actually have a four-pronged evaluation process led by different researchers from the University of Toronto and Master University, and I won't go too much into the depth of these, but just to know that we're doing surveys in neighborhoods on quality of life, we're doing process evaluations, we're doing indicator work, and we are evaluating the plan implementation. So we're looking at all of the neighborhood action activities, and we're actually evaluating how many of those get implemented and what the barriers and enablers to that implementation is going to be. So next slide. Within the City of Hamilton, one of the goals of the neighborhood strategy, when our city manager, Chris Murray, really came up with this idea and worked with other partners to have it happen, was to break down silos in city departments and have city departments and divisions and programs work together to support residents in a holistic way. So as you know, within a municipality, we have public works departments that work on roads and traffic and parks and many other things. So community services, we do, recreation, Ontario work, housing, planning, of course, does our plans, public health runs a number of health services. And so what we really hope to do was have city staff come together and in a project way work with residents together as a city, so we would have this comprehensive response. So we're tracking to see if that's actually happening. Of the 421 actions, so this is data from last year, we'll have new data in the fall of this year, 57 were completed by the end of last year, and a further 156 are underway. Of the 421 actions, the City of Hamilton has actually responded to 279, which is a huge number. And 105 actions have 2 or more city departments working together. So this is the beginning of what the city manager envisioned when he supported and championed the neighborhood strategy from the beginning, and it actually is playing out. So the next slide is a Venn diagram that really shows where city departments are starting to work together on different actions. And we hope next year we see in the middle of that diagram, or tulip, or whatever you'd like to call it, those ones and zeros. We would like to see bigger, better numbers to really show good synergies between our city departments. So next slide.
So, obviously with all the work that's being undertaken and the evaluation that's being undertaken, we're in a process where we're looking at continuous improvement. So where can we improve the work that we're doing? And we're finding that, obviously we need to improve on engagement, promotion and awareness of the initiative, and also longer-term sustainability, which is always a question that's top mind of any kind of project like this. Not all of the areas have been successful at this point in time, but certainly we're working on that. We have, a code in community development, community of practice between the community developers, the recreation business consultants, the public health nurses, City of Hamilton community developers, and now community librarians that are starting to focus the work a little bit better so that the synergies that were described earlier can work a little more. What we're reminded too is that some of the traditional methods of promotion don't work. The newspaper ads, flyers, and posters don't work. So we have these neighborhood newspapers which are proving to be better tools for us to engage with people. These are newspapers that are literally delivered door to door in all the priority neighborhoods. We have many partners at the table that have come to the table funding specific projects. The City of Hamilton, the Best Start Network, and the Hamilton Community Foundation are the only ones funding the project year after year. We have received some funding from an American foundation for our urban farm initiative. We're starting to kind of broaden our perspectives around that funding. We have received funding from the Ministry of Training Colleges and Universities for the Neighborhood Home Improvement Program in the past. And we're doing things even like aligning the work of our Housing and Homelessness Action Plan and the priorities there and, for example, creating a home ownership program that's targeted within the neighborhood. Implementation on quick wins and building on other existing programs like park cleanups have been successful, but as I said earlier, things are becoming a little more complex, and they're therefore a little bit more difficult to get off the ground. But new funding is certainly helping this, and the tracking tool is a good way to raise awareness within the city departments of the actions, and this should also bring more support to the table. Next slide.
Okay, so that's a very sort of complex neighborhood strategy in a few minutes. So we hope we touched on as many of the salient points as possible, but we'd like to hear questions and be able to respond to the areas of interest that the listeners have.
Folks, we're moving into the question and answer portion. Thank you, Suzanne and Renee, for your fabulous presentation. There's so many interesting dimensions of this that you've woven together. You know, the focus on assets, building on John McKnight's thinking, the investment in building the leadership capacity of residents and supporting them in identifying their own plans, and then all the work you're now doing around metrics as well to sort of monitor progress over time and seeing how within the city itself there's new integration happening. Really, really inspiring stuff. I know we've heard lots. We've received lots of questions from folks who across Canada who are doing this kind of work. Folks on the call, any questions for Suzanne or Renee, or any insights, any feedback? You can either put a question in the chat box, or you can use the hand-raising feature just to indicate that you have a question, and then we'll unmute you.
All right. Sylvia, I have a bunch of questions that are coming into the question box, but first I'd love to invite Michelle Samuels. I see a hand up, so I'm going to unmute you, Michelle, if you'd like to answer your question. She's from Peel Region. There you are, Michelle. Michelle,
hello,
are you there?
Can you hear us?
Hi, Michelle.
How do we talk?
You're on. You're live.
What's your question, Michelle?
All right. I have Michelle's question here. At what stage in your action planning do residents take the leadership training?
That's an excellent question. So the Leadership Institute this is its third year running. We basically put a call out to the neighborhoods, to the groups, and we call them planning teams, or actually they call themselves, and we just follow along. Planning teams, hubs, community associations, to ask them who would like to participate. It's a very time intensive, so not everybody actually wants to participate, and we ask them when they want to. So that has been an open opportunity for the last 3 years, and then the groups, the neighborhoods decide. They have an application form to fill out. I think next year they're going to do an interview with the 2 directors of the Institute to make sure that their understanding of what it is matches what it actually is. And so it's really an open call. What we're also doing next year is opening it to residents beyond the 11 neighborhoods. So this was originally funded by the Hamilton Foundation for the 11 neighborhoods in the strategy. When we've gone to City Council, we've been a number of times, both with our neighborhood action plans that residents present, as well as many other projects we've asked for funding for. One of the common refrains we get now is, what can you do in my neighborhood? Because we're really only in 4 wards in Hamilton. So other councillors are interested in this work. So we opened the neighborhood, we funded, and we'll be opening the Neighbourhood Leadership Institute next year to residents outside of our 11 neighborhoods. We also have alumni, so residents who have taken the sessions in the past who actually come back and co-facilitate sessions in the following year. So we have a number of alumni who are starting to form their own networks and circles around the Neighbourhood Leadership Institute and starting to create cross-neighborhood actions that they work on together beyond the action plan.
That's really inspiring stuff. Another question? Anybody? Christy, maybe you can read another one from your list.
I don't have any hands raised, but I have about 20 questions here. So we'll start with one from Laura McBride. Were existing neighborhood resident associations included as stakeholders?
In the beginning of I'm assuming that she's asking in terms of were they included as stakeholders at the beginning of the strategy in 2010? And the answer is yes. The Hamilton Foundation went out and talked individually to each of their 8 neighborhoods to see if they would be interested in sort of changing their journey a little bit to start to do the neighborhood action planning process. And they 7 of the 8 agreed. One neighborhood felt that they didn't want to go that route, and so there was a new group formed in that neighborhood to do the neighborhood action work. And the neighborhoods that came on, that weren't Hamilton neighborhoods, actually came to the city and asked to be a part of the strategy. So they were stakeholders from the very beginning.
Laura says, thanks. That's great. And now I have a question from Nani Parkinson from Peterborough. Who runs the Neighborhood Leadership Institute and how is it funded?
So this is Renee here. The Neighborhood Leadership Institute is run through the Hamilton Community Foundation in partnership with the City of Hamilton. It is funded by the Community Foundation because they see that a significant part of the work that needs to be done is around building leadership, good leadership practices, doing some skill building, and also kind of incorporating lifelong learning as we go along. So they're very invested in this particular component, alongside also providing funding for the community developers. But the Neighborhood Leadership Institute, you can actually go to the Hamilton Community Foundation website, and you'll see there's a little video there about the NLI and a bit about the process of engagement. The partnership is also with Mohawk College, so we do have some folks from Mohawk who participate in the workshop. But again, the newer feature with the alumni participating as well is really an added element. Again, it shows how we can work with people and bring them into leadership and use them as part of a good knowledge exchange and a good learning activity for everyone.
Wow.
Thank you. And we have a question from Abby Grafstein. Abby, I'm going to unmute you. You're welcome to ask your question. Are you there, Abby? Abby? Well.
Can you ask it for Abby, Christy?
Yeah, I don't have her question here, but I've got another one. Abby, if you want to send that to me, if you're not comfortable with saying the question, you're welcome to just type it in and I'll do my best to get to them. So, hi, this is Iris from Kitchener-Waterloo. What sort of approach strategy is used to work through conflict as it arises with community partners and residents?
This is Renee here. What an excellent question. And certainly I really appreciate the kind of digging deeper into the narrative here, because there's a couple of different approaches that we're using around conflict management and conflict resolution. Some of them are a little more kind of on a case-by-case basis, where we're working directly with residents from specific planning teams. We've also provided support in the form of training opportunities with specialists in conflict management and conflict resolution. The community developers themselves have also taken training in this area. And what we're really promoting and talking about is the concept that conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. It's how you approach it and how you manage it and how you deal with it. So for people not to be conflict or risk adverse, but see that as an opportunity to really engage deeply on the particular issues that have caused the conflict and use that as a point of change and a point of action.
Mm. I think we probably have time for 2 or 3 more questions. Christy, do you want to kind of scan that list and see if there's one that's sort of a reoccurring one or a theme?
Yes. So we do have one here from Janice Ouellette. Are those who have developed neighborhood action plans organized groups, or are like, i.e. neighborhood associations, or are they informal groups?
So the neighborhoods right now that are in our strategy, all 11 of them have a formalized neighborhood group, whether they're neighborhood associations, community associations, planning teams, or hubs. They all use a somewhat different terminology, but that was one of the prerequisites for doing the neighborhood action planning, was that the group had to be established and agree to be leaders of the action plan throughout the process. So one of the things that we haven't done yet is really, well, we're just starting to do in a different capacity, but we have not worked with neighborhoods that don't have an established group, because that takes a lot of time. The grassroots community development work that needs to happen with a group of individuals to become a functioning neighborhood group takes a fair bit of time, and so we really wanted to get the strategy off the ground and start to show some of the things that we could do. And so we worked with established groups. Currently, we do have a community development worker who's funded through the city who actually goes out and meets with smaller groups of residents who want to form neighborhood associations. So again, beyond the 11 neighborhoods that we're working in, we now have some support to help residents form their own groups.
It's Sylvia here. Can you maybe share a little bit about how you've been able to keep your entire city council on side when you're working in small, in specific neighborhoods? And how do you build support with council as a whole around this work?
So council has been on board from the beginning. One of the things that our city manager did, because he's very clever, he went to council right away and asked them if they would endorse this strategy, and they agreed to do so, and then funded $2 million to go to support neighborhood action and neighborhood improvement projects throughout the 11 neighborhoods. So from the very beginning, we had council support, and that some of that, as I said earlier, came about through the Code Red series, but also all the other work that councillors knew about had been happening in Hamilton. So I think the timing was very good as well for that. We have gone to council probably more times than any other program in the city. So we've gone with all 10 of our neighborhood action plans and presented those to council. We've gone with annual updates. We've brought in keynote speakers. We've talked to councillors individually, one-on-one, about the work that's happening in the neighborhoods, the work that's happening in their wards. And we really encourage residents to talk to their councillors as well and to form those relationships. So we really have had great uptake from Hamilton councillors. They have been very much on board, even when some of the conflict has, really burbled over into neighborhood work, and groups are very quick to call their councillors into those areas of conflict. The councillors have been very supportive of this work and continue to be so.
Wow, very inspiring. Time for one final question.
I have a question here from Stephen Lynn. He says, thank you. Great presentation overview. When this plan was brought forward to the City of Hamilton to endorse and support, was there resistance from city councillors who would not be receiving investment in their ward? If so, how did you deal with that concern?
That's very interesting, actually. It's a good question. So there was not resistance from councillors who wanted it in their ward. What has evolved over the last 4 or 5 years is the councillors who had neighborhoods in their ward were very on board and very much wanted it to happen. And the other councillors were, they were happy to have it be supported in those wards, but they felt like it wasn't necessary in their wards, that they didn't have some of the inequity issues that these neighborhoods had. So they weren't I would say they were more ambivalent to it, right? It was great to be happening in the neighborhoods that it was happening, but they didn't see any real fit for it in their own wards. But I will say that now one of the biggest challenges that we have as a strategy, because we are still a small strategy and we don't have all our sustainability in place, is that councillors want this work happening in their wards. They have well seen this beyond a poverty issue, beyond an inclusion issue. They see that community development work is valuable in any neighborhood. And so that's why we've expanded the Neighbourhood Leadership Institute, and that's why we have a community developer that now works across the city, because councillors now have seen the success that this strategy has brought, and now they want it in their ward. So we're, in some ways, we become a little bit victims of our success because we don't have a lot of resources to support outside of our 11 neighborhoods. But of course, we believe passionately in this work, so we try in whatever way we can to support other neighborhoods and other wards to bring them into the strategy in whatever way we can.
Well, thank you, Suzanne and Renee, for this presentation this morning. Clearly, you've just whet our appetite, I think. What's been so beautiful and valuable is that you've offered us a way of, in learning about your story, seeing how the work of citizens can be accelerated, and through the work of the creation of neighborhood action plans, and individually and collectively how we can be strengthened to improve the city overall. So congratulations to you all. Many thanks to everyone joining our call today. In spite of our little technical glitches, I think certainly it's a topic of great interest, and so I'm glad to see so many of you on the call. As Christy said at the outset, we will, in the next few days, send out an email to all of you who've registered that includes links to the audio and the various materials that Suzanne and Renee have shared with us today. And we also welcome your feedback, as always, on the calls. So please do email Tamarack at tamarack@tamarackcommunity.ca and give us any feedback you have about the calls or any ideas for future webinars as well. If you can go to the next slide, we at Tamarack have a number of learning events coming up that might be of interest to you all. Certainly, we have a number of monthly webinars, seminars like this one. We have a number of websites. We have our e-newsletter, which is free. You just have to subscribe for it, and a number of face-to-face learning events, online learning communities, and communities of practice that we host for people interested in meeting up with others and accelerating their work. And just a profile for you, some of the upcoming face-to-face learning events that you might want to join us at. Next week, coming up fast, is the first ever Living Wage Leaders Gathering. It's happening in Ottawa on May 5th. And then, of course, following upon that is the first ever National Poverty Reduction Summit. Some 350 people, I believe, are registered to be in Ottawa May 6th to 8th. And we have our Neighbours event happening June 8th to 10th. We have been really pleased and proud to partner with the City of Hamilton to host this Neighbours event in Hamilton this year, June 8th to 10th. Joining us are John McKnight, the founder of AssetBased Community Development, Jim Deers, well-known neighborhood strategist, and Vicky Kamak, who's very much about how formal and informal systems link up together, as well as Paul Johnson, Milton Friesen, myself, Paul Ballern. It'll be a fabulous opportunity to learn more about neighborhood-based work. And finally, later this fall, September 28th to October 2nd, in Vancouver, BC, we are hosting a Collective Impact Summit with John Konya, Alec Mansky, and many others. So hope you can join us and meet up face-to-face. And we'd love to also see and profile your work. Finally, Tamarack is now partnering with interested local communities to host Deepening Community Conversations initiatives. We're just wrapping one up now in Grey Bruce and have the capacity to take on up to 4 additional ones, where we're using, in partnership with local champions, the power of conversations to help citizens meet each other and identify shared opportunities to work together. So be sure to visit and share your own blogs on our Learning Community site, which is seekingcommunity.ca. And thank you all for a fabulous webinar. Look forward to meeting many of you in face-to-face, and have a lovely rest of your afternoon. And again, a big shout out to both you, Suzanne and Renee, for being so generous in sharing your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.